I'm Roniel,
I'm DaRon.
and today we have a treat. We get to talk about what it's like to be a NIST author.
Just to start off really quickly, I am a government contractor. We've kind of discussed that and maybe alluded to it here and there. As a government contractor, I get to do a lot of different things. Now, there are different roles, and everyone's, what all you, if you're on site, then you tend to be pigeonholed. Whereas if you're not, you can get assigned to a lot of different contracts. I bring this up not to segue into a completely different topic, but to say it's actually how I became an actual NIST author. So NIST does a lot of their writing through contractors like me. Actually, as far as I know, all of the writing gets done by contractors like myself. And most often it's Booz Allen Hamilton who owns the contract. I wound up getting roped into it in mid 2000s through Booz Allen Hamilton, where I was working at the time. And I actually wrote multiple NIST special publications, and I wrote a whole bunch of other stuff that NIST uses and distributes that aren't special publications. And I'll tell you, it's very prestigious, but I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. And actually, to the point where I actually removed my name and asked for my name to be removed from a number of the special publications because I wasn't happy with the end result. That's one of the keys here. The authors of these special publications are not the people you see on the front page. They're the people you see in the acknowledgements. And usually they're buried in the acknowledgements. For example, the two where you will see my name currently, you will see that I'm in the middle of it with a whole bunch of other people's names all around. And I was the only author on one, and I was a co-author on the other. It was myself and another gentleman. But we're in the acknowledgements. That's one of the joys of being a contractor. You do the work, but you don't necessarily get any credit for it. And in fact, actually, you'll see there's a certain individual from NIST who recently was running around telling everyone how he wrote a very recent publication, which he did not write. Contractors wrote, but he ran around all these news organizations and did interviews. I think that's one of the hardest parts about being a writer for it. I don't care, obviously, about publicity. Again, we've mentioned it before. That's actually why we don't use our real names on this. It's one of the reasons we don't use our real names on this. But at the same time, I don't like it when people take credit for other people's work. And that's when you are an actual writer for NIST, you will not be cited in many cases, and if you are, it's only ever in the acknowledgments. So no one knows that you wrote it. You're basically a ghostwriter. It was a ghostwriter.
Oh man! So did you ghostwrite for Drake? Do you know who Drake is?
I know who Drake is. Come on.
Okay, all right.
I don't know any of his works.
I had to make sure you knew who Drake was, but you're sure you didn't ghostwrite for him?
He's a dragon, right?
He's a dragon. Probably is. Is that a sign? But hey, he probably is a dragon. That might be his next album. So I wouldn't be surprised. So everybody be on the lookout for DaRon writing Drake's new album. All right. It's that. Did you write Certified Lover Boy? Did you have
No.
that whole, aura? But anyway, yeah, that's kind of crazy. So how does it feel for someone just for all of the people out there that may be wanting to do that or write for some type of special publication and they might not get the credit they deserve?
I'll tell you, at the time, I really enjoyed doing it. But then the politics started coming in. And so things that I wanted to put in there, they refused to let us put in there. I'll give you a good example. This is 2007, and it's enterprise password management. I said, let's put in a requirement saying that passwords have to be at least 15 characters long. You might ask, why 15? That seems like a random number, right?
But it's not.
It's not. It was very intentional. So Windows XP was the predominant operating system at the time, although this affects even Windows 10. In a mixed environment where you have, say, Windows 95 or older Windows NT systems, the LAN-MAN hash can still be used. And especially back then, it was still heavily used. By moving to 15, now the way LAN-MAN works is it can accept a password from 1 to 14 characters long. And the reason why it's 14 is because they split the password in half. So Microsoft's LAN-MAN hash algorithm takes 2 7-character long passwords effectively and hashes them separately and then just concatenates the 2 hashes as one. That's how that winds up working. The point being, you can then crack LAN-MAN hashes very easily because I don't have to crack a 14-character long password. I have to crack 2 7-character long passwords. And in cracking the one, I'm going to get the other. That's just how this works. At 15 characters, it doesn't matter what setting you have, it can't fit in a LAN-MAN hash. Therefore, Windows does one of 2 things depending on the configuration. Either 1, it stores the partial password. Or 2, and this became the default in later service packs, it just doesn't use LAN-MAN at all. So the easy way to prevent Windows XP and above, and even your later service packs of Windows 2003, was to do 15 characters. That prevents the LAN-MAN hash from ever being stored, and it only used NTLM, which was the replacement for LAN-MAN. So that's why it said 15 characters.
So, and is the reason why for justifying that they didn't do 15 is because people can't remember that long of a password? Or was there more to that?
Actually, it's worse than that. See, that I could be like, that's a user training issue, right?
Right.
Their rationale was they didn't want to create new requirements that made people have to spend money upgrading or updating their systems. Let me rephrase that for those of you who didn't catch on to what they're really saying. They didn't want to put in new security requirements that would secure systems and fix a lot of problems that existed at the time because they didn't want people to have to spend money securing their systems.
That's got me mind blown, like mind fucked, like literally you're gonna have to do that anyway. That's what they're doing anyway, to spend money to secure their system. They're buying all this useless shit. But yet that one thing that could have really protected a lot of people's passwords, you decide you don't want to do that because you don't want to spend money, and they're buying all the next gen shit,
right,
just to protect things. Oh,
right.
Jesus.
And I heard that time and time again with different suggestions that I made. And so that winds up meaning that when we wrote these special publications, we were oftentimes gelded. And what we could put in was very minimal. We couldn't get people to increase their security because if we made someone increase their security, we were making them spend money. So all of the recommendations and all of the stuff that we put in these was maintaining the status quo. And that is why it still continues to be 12 character minimum instead of 15 or something else. And here's the thing. If you teach people properly, so when we went from 8 to 12, people just started tacking on numbers, right? A lot of people did because so many people in security don't understand how to communicate with a user community. And I don't understand why. And what happened as a result was you had ridiculously insecure passwords. And you still have ridiculously insecure passwords. When we run engagements, I see all the time passwords that are a joke. I also see ones that are jokes, like people calling their work hellhole and things of that nature. I mean,
Oh man.
I don't think they
Uh,
realized that someone would crack that.
yeah. I, mm, I'm not gonna even say anything about it. I just feel like it's just that's right there analogy. That what you just said just kind of irks the shit out of me. Like, and then keeping the status quo. That's you know what it sounds like? It sounds like a marketing person saying, "Hey, uh, we don't want you to, basically go out and do all of this stuff. We want you to just keep keep at the status quo so we can keep getting your money.
Right.
That way that anytime you get hacked, we can come in and save the day, or you can call us and we do that. Like, come on, man. Like, if you had a chance to elevate people's security and make them better, and you know that they follow you as the standard, why wouldn't you?
Right.
Because you don't get that from OWASP.
Right. Yes. Yes. You're
You know,
exactly right. And that's one of the worst parts about all of this to me is NIST is the de facto authority for most organizations, most non-government organizations out there. It is the actual authority for most federal organizations, but it's the de facto authority for most. And when you look at the ISOs, the 2700 series, that's all based off of NIST. It's a bad rewrite, so to speak, of the NIST 853, which you used to see my name on actually 3 different revisions of that, but I had my name removed, and a couple others.
it was that bad.
Yeah, I that's one of the things is I get frustrated. I got frustrated by being constantly hamstrung. And here's the thing: you would write the whole thing, and then you turn it over to the government for comments, and you wouldn't get much back. The only thing you would ever get back is, oh no, we can't have this requirement. We can't have this requirement. We can't have this requirement. No new requirements. And we would constantly get told, don't put in new requirements. Don't put in new requirements. And I was just always going, well, why? I mean, so the special publications are all guidelines. Now, if you don't know what that means it's not technically a requirement. That means that you have wiggle room. So if we said 15, for example, you can still have an authorizing official sign off on the fact that you only have a 12-character long minimum password. You can do that. It's unfathomable to me that NIST fails to make proper use of its position, which is incredibly important to helping better secure the federal government, but as a result, also the commercial world, because so many commercial entities used and still use NIST guidance, or at least leverage parts of it. I mean, again, the ISO 2700 series is a bad ripoff of the NIST guidance, which, by the way, if I were to suggest people use something, I would go with the DISA STIGs. The DISA has a large amount of guidance out there that's available that's significantly better, but it's more hardcore, and a lot of people don't understand them well enough to properly implement them, and so instead they brick the system. What I would not use are the NSA guidelines.
Okay. So before I ask you this other question, I would like to, for the people that don't understand or don't know what DISA is, can you explain what it is? And can you also explain how NIST became the de facto standard? And then I'll ask you the next question after.
Sure. So DISA is an organization within the Department of Defense whose sole job is to help provide what they call information assurance. Cybersecurity is a small segment of information assurance. If you look at the actual body of security, information assurance includes non-repudiation, physical security, authorization, and a whole slew of other things that cybersecurity doesn't include. We discussed that. We touched on that real briefly previously. And so DISA's job is to create requirements, guidelines, testing documents and processes for the entirety of the Department of Defense. So the U.S. military, and of course, some of the other segments that are within that. They have civilian, and then they also have military agencies within the Department of Defense. And all of those guidelines are designed to help secure classified and unclassified DoD assets. Think of them as a governing body of sorts as far as producing standards and guidelines for the military, because that's what they are. NIST, so in 2002, I believe it was, Congress charged NIST. I don't know why, but I do know why, but it was still a weird thing to have done. Congress charged NIST with producing guidance and requirements for the entirety of the federal government as far as security is concerned, excluding the DoD. The DoD was excluded because the DoD stuff was and continues to be more stringent and significantly better. After probably about 10 years of doing this, the commercial world started paying more attention to security. So you're talking probably around 2010, 2012. The commercial world started paying more attention to security after a series of major incidents, and they looked around for where they could find good guidance. And there really, other than the federal government, there wasn't anything. And there still isn't much that's great out there. And people started using the NIST guidance, the NIST Special Publications. Most people didn't use FIPS. NIST has multiple segments, but it is the FIPS series, and then it has the Special Publication series, and then a few others that are not relevant to this conversation. And the FIPS series are all requirements, meaning you have to do them, but they're largely pertaining to cryptographic stuff. For whatever reason, the commercial world never picked up on that. The commercial world tends to be afraid of government cryptography requirements. They just don't.
Why is that? You don't know.
I think honestly it's because the commercial world prefers to use weaker encryption in general.
They prefer to use weaker everything.
Yeah, but you'll still see a ton of people using MD5. I don't know why MD5 is so broken. In the digital forensics world, I still see people walking around, well, we hashed this, and you look at the hash and you're like, this is MD5. Yeah, why are you using MD5? Or they're still using SHA-1. Why the hell anyone would still use SHA-1? I don't understand.
What? You mean it's not secure? Everybody think that's secure. Like, I've seen clients use SHA-1.
That's been broken since 2006. That was publicly broke. Actually, it was broken before then, but it was publicly broken in 2007 when a gentleman from Czechoslovakia showed that you can do bit twiddling on the entire SHA family. At the time, it was SHA-1, but SHA-2 is based off of that enough. SHA-3 is completely different. But I don't understand why SHA-1 is still around. I really don't. And bit twiddling is important for forensics, right? Because if I can bit twiddle and come up with a fake document that has the exact same hash just by taking that original and tampering with it, then everything is thrown into disarray from a digital forensics perspective, because now I can't trust my hashes. The end result of all of this is that while I enjoyed parts of what I did, I don't think I would repeat the experience. I don't think I plan on writing any more NIST anything. I had a lot more fun working with DISA and writing DoD requirements, DoD guidance and guidelines. I've had a lot more fun doing the same thing for other government agencies and doing it for the IAEA, for example, than I did with NIST. And the IAEA is also relatively political, but it's less so than NIST, which is weird to say. I could get more security requirements in the IAEA stuff than I could with NIST. With DISA, it was easy. I mean, the DoD has no problem saying thou shalt and forcing someone to do it. NIST was just so milk toast on the whole matter. It's so weak. I don't understand. I don't understand that. And if you look at some of the more recent documents, you'll see that they're not very great. They have one on secure software development, and it's horrible. Absolutely terrible.
I read that one.
It's so bad.
I read the one on control systems as well.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like it.
Yes. Let me diverge for 1 second, and this hits on something that we talked about previously. The best thing that came of writing NIST Special Publications is most people do not understand them and do not know how to read them, especially in the security industry. And so when they read it, they almost 100% of the time completely, utterly, totally misunderstand what it is saying, which is weird because they're even, for example, in 53, there are detailed explanations for each one of the controls and for all the enhancements. So I've never been able to understand why people misinterpret them so often. But I've sat down in rooms with auditors and they supposedly had a finding, and I'm sitting there going, that's not what that control says at all. There was a good one. You and I were at this organization, and the auditor came over and they hit them on system interconnections. And I looked at the guy and I said, would you please define what an interconnection is?
And they didn't know what it was.
He didn't know. Instead, he was like, well, it's in the document. It's in 800-53. And I said, I know that. Will you please define what it says? He said, well, you can look it up in the document. And I said, I wrote that. Will you please define what it says? Because you do not seem to understand what it says. Oh, he was so flabbergasted because I don't think he expected to have met someone who, I mean, there actually are very few NIST, there are very few authors of any of these, period. It's a very small group of people. Most of them work out of DC, by the way. But, yeah. I mean, he was just utterly stunned, and he couldn't define it. So I start quoting it off the top of my head. This is the weirdest thing when you have to stare at these things a lot, because we do a lot of reviews, internal reviews, before anything gets published, and you get a lot of comments. And this, again, is within the group that writes these. So you get a lot of comments and feedback back and forth. You wind up knowing these things incredibly well. Plus, I have been an auditor and all this other stuff for a very lengthy period of time. And the man was utterly shocked. And I was just going, this isn't a finding. And he didn't know what to do with it because he's sitting there in an outbrief trying to claim something's a finding when he literally got shut down by someone who wrote the thing he was trying to point at, who also told him, you don't understand what this control means, and then explained the control to him. I mean, what are you going to do?
I'm going to be like, well, you're right. I thought I knew what it was, but then that makes it bad for that person because then are they really a good auditor then?
Right.
Do they really know what they're doing with the whole process?
Right. Yeah, see, and that was the big thing that I saw is they misunderstood. When we sat down doing the interviews, I actually was having to actually explain to them what the controls meant, because these auditors interviewing these developers and stuff, and I was just sitting there as an intermediary, because oftentimes you have to translate security when you're working with system administrators, developers, and that kind of stuff. You have to translate it into a language they know. That's one of the biggest things people forget. The NIST Special Publications were written for the security community. And if you don't understand the lingo, the language of the security community, you will misunderstand it. I think that's part of the reason why so many auditors don't understand it. And it's also kind of fluid as to what's being talked about. When you're talking about firewalls, for example, there are many different definitions of the word firewall. And even within IT, it depends heavily on who you're talking to and what you're talking about. So I'm sitting in these interviews, and the auditor asks a question. So I then turn to the developer, translate the question. The developer responds. I turn to the auditor and translate the response, because it's like they're speaking different languages, and that's so common, and it frustrates me because you as an auditor should be able to speak technical and should be able to understand what a developer or what a system administrator is telling you. But instead, I see all the time where they're bickering back and forth. And one is saying they're compliant because of this, this, and this, and the other is saying you're not compliant. And I'm sitting there listening going, he's compliant, you're not understanding him. Or, she's not compliant, you're not understanding, she's not understanding you. You're speaking across each other, and there's no one. That I think was the biggest. It's an annoyance. But being able to sit as an authority on these things in a meeting and say, no, you're wrong, so-and-so either is or isn't, this is applicable, this control isn't applicable, this is a finding, this isn't a finding, and the auditor always kicks back, or the other side always kicks back, and being able to say, no, you're wrong, your understanding and interpretation is wrong, and I know this because I wrote it, has been the most invaluable thing. If I could only pick one positive, I should say, that is the one positive I would pick, is that I can always definitively in a room as an authority say, no, you're wrong. That is not what this control says, and that is not what this control means. And the other person can't say a thing back, because when they do, I say, would you like to go look at the acknowledgements? Scroll up, scroll up, scroll up. You see that name right there? That's me. I wrote this.
And what's so crazy? It was so crazy to the point where you were able to say that, but then you have the company of the people that you're defending saying that you shouldn't say that because now you have.
That's true. That's true. That is, by the way, I actually very rarely talk about the fact that I wrote any of these things because, it's just not something that I actually usually don't talk about myself very frequently. I don't like to. I really don't like to. But I started doing it in these audits because these auditors would push and push and push and push because they didn't understand. It was just so much more convenient. You eventually get to that point where you're like, look, see, that's my name. I wrote this. But you're exactly right. I actually got told by my management at this company, not at the company I currently work for, but at this one company, oh, you really shouldn't tell people you did that because it makes them feel bad. Like, I shouldn't say I wrote this because it makes someone feel bad. How does that make sense?
Especially if they are misquoting or don't understand what the controls do. Right. You have to let them understand. And even if you told them, no, that's not right, what this means, then they're going to take, well, who are you to say that? You wrote it. So you obviously know. Yes. So you have to defend yourself as well.
And that's exactly what happens every time is they'll be like, oh, well, you can't know that's what was really intended. You can't know that's what this means. It's like, I can.
Right. And you try your best to say, hey, look, I'm trying to let you off the hook here. You don't want me to really pull out the big guns. And then next thing you know, they take you to that level and then you have to let them down very easy, huh? That's right. And it gets funny because you'll have people who will argue with you tooth and nail. Like we saw argue with you that, oh, you must not have read NIST Special Publication 800-61. No, I read that. Do you even know NIST? Do you even know what you're talking about? No, I don't. Well, if anyone's interested or curious, I will say, like I said, there are very few NIST authors out there. And it actually, you just have to work for the company that actually has the contract to write those. You have to work on that team or be good enough that
you get noticed and put on that team. In my case, actually, what the initial catalyst was I was the only application security professional in the entire company. So that started it. Plus, it turns out that I can actually write a sentence. I'm so glad my mother was an English teacher.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good for some people who can't.
Yes, yes.
But that is a requirement.
It is. Yes, you have to be able to write. You have to. Writing is important in this field, is it not?
Definitely, it is. You'll learn very, very shortly when you get into this field that you have to know how to write.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know how to write, it's great or perfectly, then you're gonna have to level up.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have to get better at it. But I think it's a lot of the times it's the way things are formatted and the way people want you to write.
Right.
Because I was really good at English and writing sentences, paragraphs, and essays and thesis and shit like that. But you get into this field and you start to want to write a thesis, and then they're telling you like, no, that's not. And I'm like, but I'm trying, not saying I'm writing a thesis, but I'm trying to write a good paper, and then they're like, no, that's not how we do that. You need to do it this. So you're telling me to dumb it down, and that's what you think is a good report.
Right. Yes. That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
But anyway, if you like this segment, please let us know. Give us more, comment down below in the comment section. Let us know what else you would like to see or what it's like to be. And until then, I'm Ronnie.
I'm DaRon.
Until the next time, like, comment, and subscribe.
Have fun.
Later.